Hello, my name is Tyler Christensen, and this video is the culmination of a research project on the Revolution. Our thesis statement for this project is the following. Violence is a sound strategy to bring about significant political and social change. To help support this argument, we will be investigating various case studies, including the Stamp Act riots of 1765, the Boston Massacre in 1770, the Boston Tea Party in 1773, and the battles of Lexington and Concord in 1775. Let's start with the Stamp Act riots. The Stamp Act was passed by Parliament in 1765. This act required many printed materials in the colonies to be created on stamped paper, which was produced in London. This tax aimed to pay for the troops stationed in North America after the 7 Years' War. To say the least, the colonists disagreed with this additional tax, especially because they had no representation in Parliament. The objections to the Stamp Act gave birth to protests and riots. Shopkeepers decided to refrain from selling British-manufactured goods, and violence was used to intimidate tax agents through personal attacks and public demonstrations. Rioters ransacked homes of stamp commissioners and engaged in brutal physical violence. Some commissioners resigned as soon as the day after the attacks to avoid further assaults. After only a few months, there was not a single stamp commissioner to collect the tax. The Stamp Act was eventually repealed. Although these attacks were not as brutal as the tarring and feathering of England, the violence set forth by the colonists was enough to make Parliament want to repeal the Stamp Act. The success of the Stamp Act riots shows the benefit of using violence to bring about change. The Boston Massacre in 1770 is another violent event in American history that's worth talking about. British troops had been stationed in Boston since 1768 in an effort to protect the colonial officials that were from Britain. On March 5, 1770, a crowd surrounded a British soldier, who was joined later by approximately 8 more soldiers. The colonists harassed the British, throwing snowballs at them and making fun of them. In the confusion of the shouting and commands by their captain, the British began shooting, even when no official command was given. This assault on the colonists killed about 5 and injured 6. The violence that the colonists instigated was a loss in terms of human life. However, in other regards, it was relatively successful. In retrospect, the Boston Massacre represents a battle of liberty. It represents the idea that standing up for yourself and your beliefs is the most important. The Boston Massacre was also successful for another reason. Sam Adams insisted that the British troops leave Boston. Since the addition of the British troops to the Boston community, colonists had had countless objections to the king. The departure of British troops was exactly what the colonists desired from the violence of the Boston Massacre. Another important event in American history, one that is iconic for protest, is the Boston Tea Party. This was led by the Sons of Liberty, and was in an effort to protest the tax policy of the British and the East India Company. Many historians consider the Tea Party to be the culmination of the objections by the colonists in regards to the widely disputed Tea Act. Similar to the Stamp Act, colonists did not appreciate taxation without representation. In December of 1773, when Boston officials had refused to return shiploads of taxed tea to Britain, colonists decided to board the boats and begin their rampage. Tea aboard was cast into the Boston harbor in an effort to destroy all potential profits. This event, on one cold December evening, had multiple impacts on them. Unfortunately for the colonists, Parliament passed the Intolerable Acts, which included strict measures that hoped to end the colonial resistance to the British authority. However, the Tea Party is widely regarded as an important event in the development of the American Revolution. Many petitions followed, eventually leading to the Revolutionary War in 1775. The violent outbreak in the Boston harbor would eventually lead to American independence. The battles of Lexington and Concord are important battles in American history. On April 18, 1775, approximately 700 British troops marched in the direction of Concord in an effort to seize an armory. The following day, the British troops had arrived in Lexington. There they faced approximately 80 militiamen. Shots rang out and several colonists were killed. The remaining ones retreated. The British continued on their mission, only to find no arms in Concord. The militiamen then hustled to the North Bridge, where they met up with the Redcoats. It is debated who shot first, but the colonists, now with more militiamen, fired on the British and were successful. Approximately 250 Redcoats died from this event. This battle is noteworthy in U.S. history because it kicked off the Revolutionary War, which lasted from 1775 to 1783. This violence from the colonists sparked more battles, and eventually the colonies formally winning the independence in 1783. Violence is a sound way to initiate political and social change. Although violence is not always preferable and can sometimes ruin the potential for peace agreements, The events which have been discussed in this video represent the success of the usage of violence in the colonies. It is important to point out that the colonists tried peaceful protests, but that did not change anything, causing them to resort to violence. The Stamp Act riots used personal attacks and demonstrations to eventually get the Stamp Act repealed. The Boston Massacre involved a violent uproar between soldiers and colonists that ultimately forced the British troops to leave Boston. The Boston Tea Party's violence eventually led to the Revolutionary War, and the battles of Lexington and Concord sparked further battles that would eventually allow the colonists to win their independence. As demonstrated throughout this documentary, violence is a reasonable strategy to bring about political and social change. Thank you for watching. This concludes my video on the usage of violence in causing political and social change. If you have any questions, you can always comment below. I know it was a lot of information at once. And if you just want more information, the hot links that I used are embedded in the information section below. Thank you.